Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Very nice to be here. My name is Giuseppe. I work for Lampenwelt for a couple of years now, Director of Engineering. Today, we're going to talk about how we do Magento at Lampenwelt. How do we do e-commerce at Lampenwelt? This is not going to be a very technical conversation. This is not going to be a very business-focused conversation. We're not going to talk about how to manage teams or how to measure the output and outcome, how Stefan did before. This is going to be mostly the experience of building a new e-commerce platform at Lampenwelt in the past 2 years. The goal back then, when I was hired at Lampenwelt, was very, very simple. We have one thing to do, and it's to modernize our platform. So what we're going to talk about today is just a few points, not that much, but of course, why Adobe Commerce? We're going to talk about how we run Adobe Commerce in the cloud. We're going to talk about performance and scalability, security and compliance. We're going to give some numbers, nothing fancy, just a few tips, a few information of what we achieved with this, and then we're open for questions. So anything that you might want to hear, just ask me later. So 2021, we had a running shop back then, thanks also to Phoenix Media, our implementation partner there. So we needed to do something about it. We were looking at a very, I wouldn't say like an old shop, but something that started showing some signs of age, some white hair here and there. So when it was hired, we wanted to, as I said before, the goal was to renew the platform. Why did we decide to go with Adobe Commerce again? But first of all, the experience we had with Magento was great back then. The partnership we had with Phoenix Media was amazing. We worked. Thank you very much, Björn. Even though back then we also had a secondary goal of building internal team to internalize the development of the whole platform. We decided to stick to Adobe Commerce because one of the benefits that we got from it was also the possibility to keep on working with Phoenix, to get some more knowledge, internalize some more knowledge, and not to just start from scratch without having any foundation to build on. On top of this, of course, Adobe Commerce has a bunch of advantages. Feature set is very large, and for our use case was large enough to cover most of the requirements, especially for B2B and B2C scenarios, not only for B2C. Being a very old, I would say old, very mature platform is also battle tested, which doesn't mean that it doesn't have problems. It means that the problems are known and it's easier to find solutions for those problems. Large amount of integrations supported by most vendors in the tech space. Talk about payment providers, shipping providers. Most of them, they have native support for Magento out of the box. It's widely adopted. And this also gives the ability to tap into a very large pool of developers out there. So it's also easier from the HR perspective, from the business perspective, to build a team, grow a team. There's still one question though. We have Magento now. How do we host Magento? How do we run Magento? There's a bunch of options out there. Again, Björn might have more expertise than I do there. They are also like a first-class player in the space. But yeah, we started taking a look at what we can do with the Magento hosting. Of course, the first choice that gets presented to you by Adobe when you go and sign a contract with them is Commerce on Cloud. Adobe has their own official solution, runs in AWS, so the cloud stamp is there. And has a bunch of advantages. It's pre-provisioned. All the services are there. They have a Git-based workflow that you can use for continuous deployment, but not continuous integration, sadly. But if you look into this, you come to the conclusion that the setup that they provide you is quite traditional. Okay, it's like a lift and shift solution. They run some servers in the cloud just like they would run on premise, and therefore has the same limitation or similar limitations that a bare metal solution has. So scaling is not automated. It requires capacity planning in advance, not only when you start with the project, but also during the year. If you have a seasonal business, you have to account for this. You have to call them in advance. There's changes need to be done, not by you, sure, by someone else, but they need to be done. The Git workflow that they provide is actually quite nice, but it's rigid. It doesn't really scale well with large teams. It's very, very fixed what you can do there. And also the development tools that they provide are not always working, let's put it this way, unless you spend a substantial amount of time modifying them. And we have some people here with first-hand experience with that. On top of this, other than this, third-party hosting. Again, prime example here, there's plenty of them on the market. There's so many options there. It's incredibly hard to evaluate all of them properly. Now, Lampenwelt, being a German company, of course, prefers European-based hosting platforms because we all have our legal requirements and our fears of repercussions there. So the choice restricts a little bit, but not that much. There's still plenty of options. But again, if you look into those, most of the companies that specialize in Magento hosting are either offering bare metal solutions or cloud solutions that are very similar to the one offered by Adobe. And integrating those hosting platform into the larger technical framework, larger security framework, the larger compliance framework that comes with a company like Lampenwelt is a tricky business. It's not easy when you have those hosting companies to get all the paperwork required. You will spend a lot of time, really a lot of time. So third option in this case for hosting is self-hosting. That's the unbeaten path for most teams. It needs competencies. It comes with a large overhead. A lot of decision needs to be taken. Do you go bare metal? Do you go cloud? Do you have the expertise in-house? Can you guarantee security and business continuity? Because third-party hoster can do that for you. But can you do that if you want to solve the other problems? This one, is it something that your team can do? And also, how do you blend this with the existing infrastructure that you have in the company? Having a completely isolated environment might help for security, but on the other hand, the moment you want to integrate or exchange data, integrate the numbers coming from Magento into other solutions, it becomes complicated. So you need to find the right balance on how to integrate the Magento hosting into your cloud platform. So ultimately, we made a decision. Okay, we looked around. We saw the expertise we had. The requirements. We evaluated them properly, and then we said, okay, well, you know what? Let's self-host this. We can do this. We have already a platform in the cloud. We have already other services running there. It's going to be a good exercise. It's going to be a challenge. But let's do this. But let's not just do this like Adobe does. Let's do it properly. Let's put a twist to this. We want to have a cloud native Magento, something that we can say, this runs in the cloud just like everything else, which is designed for the cloud works. So how do we get there? It's complicated. Again, lots of decisions to be taken. But first of all, we need a cloud provider. Not many options out there at the moment. We have Azure, we have AWS, we have GCP. Oracle Cloud might be an option if you really want to take the risk. But if you stick to the three big players, the amount of services that they offer is pretty much the same. So there's like choosing between them, it's more like personal preference than anything else at some point. So for us, what we realize is that the sweet spot between innovation, sustainability, pricing was covered by GCP, by Google Cloud. Features, they have everything we need. Yeah, sure, they have less services, less managed services than AWS and Azure, but does that really make a difference? Also, working with GCP allowed us to work with a GCP partner, so we could have a deeper connection with GCP and have access to their product teams directly. So for bug fixes, for problems, for roadmaps, internal roadmaps, also to plan the work from our side, this was absolutely priceless. So yeah, GCP was the cloud provider that we decided to work with. However, as I said before, we didn't want this to be a lift and shift. That everybody can do that. That's not the challenge that we want to take. So what we need from the cloud provider is also a platform, a hosting solution that is modern, that works with containers, that gives us the flexibility, the consistency that a technology like Docker provides. We don't want to manage servers. It was 2021 back then. It's 2023. That stuff still stands. I don't need to SSH into a machine and configure it. It's a commodity by now, and it should be. So, is there anything out there that ticks all the boxes? You have the answer already. I'm not sure, again, how technical you are, how technical the audience is today. But yeah, if you're thinking about Kubernetes, you're right. And when you look at Kubernetes, you look at Google Cloud, you know that basically they invented it. That's the best place where you can use it as a service. So the whole picture starts to show up correctly. So we have a cloud provider. We have an idea on how we want to run our workloads. So we can go live tomorrow, right? Because that's what the business expects. Sadly, that's clearly not the case. Because Adobe Commerce is not your usual cloud native application. In fact, it's not a cloud native application at all. So what is it? It's not a collection of microservices. It's not a monolith, if you think about it, because there's multiple moving parts in there that need to run at the same time. It's not a single thing. And you can easily isolate those moving parts and those components, even though they all come from the same code base. So it's a monolithic code base, but not really a monolithic application. Also, running Adobe Commerce, running Magento in general, requires some interactivity with the system. It's not something that you can just throw there and deploy automatically. It doesn't work. It's not unusual to have to do manual interventions when you deploy changes. It doesn't happen very often, to be honest, but it's not unusual. And even some regular operations need to be done by hand. Some of the regular operations even change the state of the system, of the code sometimes. So might be a stretch to say that, because we know that data storages are variable, but can we say that Magento is a stateful application? Probably yes. And stateful applications and working in the cloud as cloud native stuff is not always a great fit. On top of this, by default, Adobe Commerce is completely oblivious to the cloud. Even, it does, like you can look at multiple examples. The logs that are produced are not structured. They can't be automatically ingested and analyzed. You have to do something about them. It doesn't provide metrics out of the box. So you can't really plug something into it and look what's happening inside Magento. It's not an option. And even the default varnish configuration prevents everything from being cached outside of varnish. In the cloud, you want to take advantage of that. You want to connect with the services that the cloud provides and offload some work. So there are challenges there to run Adobe Commerce in the cloud as a cloud native application. On top of this, what about the development team? Those are the people that will touch that stuff on a daily basis. They need to have a good experience with it. It's crucial for them. Sadly, I missed the previous presentation, but I'm assuming that talking about developer, the output and outcome, providing your people with the tools that they need to achieve that, it's important. So how can we do that? What are their priorities? First of all, developers want flexibility. They want to be able to try stuff, to do things, but it needs to be simple. It doesn't have to be complex. If it's complex, at some point they will call DevOps and say, hey, I have a problem, fix it. So flexibility without complexity. They want to be free to explore. They want to be able to test, to break things, but within safe boundaries. And the second thing, other than this, they also want to have the confidence that what they do will work consistently. There's always this myth going around of, works on my machine, was deployed, it's broken because the environments are not the same. So those are the things that we need to consider when we want to provide our people with a great toolkit. So flexibility, consistency, and third thing, also way to for the environments and most the problems that we can face with those environments, that they need to be reproducible. You don't want to start chasing ghosts when you have a problem. You want to have a way to say, okay, this issue here, I can easily make it happen. I can easily reproduce it somewhere else in a way that I can debug it and fix it. So, we have all this stuff settled down. We have a bunch of ideas, great ideas on the table. So again, business comes in. Can we go live tomorrow then? We can't, not yet. But there's a difference between now and before. Now we have a way to get there. Okay? We have something, we have an idea, and this is based on our development platform. So being a large company, this is not our first project we do in the cloud. So we have something already in place. What is this thing? Where does it come from? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the concept of platform engineering. Platform engineering is a new approach to development. Very broadly speaking, I'm not going to go into details, but the goal of this approach is, of course, to help produce business value by accelerating the delivery of the features, by accelerating the output, the outcome of your development teams. And, the main staples of this approach can be condensed into two: self-service. Again, your developers need to have the flexibility to do things the way they want and what they want, and automated operations. You want things to be reproducible. You want things to happen automatically, not to go there and change things by hand, not to go into your server with a screwdriver on a daily basis. There's better use of the time of your DevOps team. So how do we do platform engineering at Lampenwelt? We have a dedicated team for that. The primary focus of the team is support. The only thing that they do is talk to the rest of the development teams and support them and provide them with the tools that they need to do their work. How do we do that? First of all, one of the first things we do is to hide the complexity of the cloud. As we said before, the developers want flexibility, but they don't want to think about it. They don't want to think behind the scenes. They want, dinner is ready, they can eat, and that's it. They don't have to think about cooking. And also, the clouds are vast environments. They're really complex. It's impossible to expect all your developers to know everything about it. So put a nice mask in front of it, make them work with it, remove some mental load from them. Second thing, we want to implement solutions that work for our development teams, but not only for one of them. They should work for all of them. This allows us to, create more value, not just for the shop team, but provide reusable solutions that everyone can benefit from. And the last thing that we want to do is automation. There's tedious tasks to do. It's inevitable. Just can't not do that. But again, spend some time automating them. Leave more time for the development team to do the work that, first of all, fits better their core competencies, and second, that provides value to the business. The outcome of this is what is known, what we call as the golden path. It's a shared, well-maintained toolkit that allows moving ideas to production as easily as possible by sticking to specific standards, and that's pretty much it. You can put a lot of words here, but the essence is very simple. Create one way to do things and adapt all and build all your internal applications on top of that. So we have the tools, we have the goal. How do we apply them to Adobe Commerce? First of all, we need to change the way we think about Adobe Commerce. We said before, it's neither a microservice nor a monolith. What is it then? How do we treat it? How do we approach it to make it work? We decided to treat it as a collection of microservices. And yeah, microservices are the first-class elements in the cloud. So let's pretend for once that Magento is a collection of microservices. So again, we have one code base. We want to have one code base. We don't want this to be spread around multiple places. We want to have one build process. We want to have one configuration as much as possible. Of course, there will be differences between environments, but you want to have one configuration. And with this, you want the possibility to run multiple separate workloads within the Magento framework, and potentially in an infinite amount of environments. Why? Again, we go back to the previous discussion. Developers want flexibility. You don't want to tell a developer, oh, well, no, you can't run another environment because it takes 2 weeks to set it up. No, you have to plan from the beginning that those things can be potentially scaled indefinitely. And on top of this, because we like to make things even more complicated, you want to have it as an immutable entity. Again, the concepts of cloud native applications. Once you build something, that's what you want to run. You don't want your setup upgrade script to change your configuration file, because that might introduce issues. That might introduce unpredictability to the system. So what about our developers? Again, they need to be happy and they demand to be happy. Their environment should be as much as possible the source of truth of what happens in production. You want them to be able to rely on the fact that what they do locally will work also there. However, we know from experience that 100% environment parity is impossible to achieve. It's hard, if not impossible. And to be honest, most of the time is not worth the effort. There will always be a 10% of differences that will take 90% of the available time to fix. Is it actually worth it? In our experience, no. But what it's worth, it's the ease of use. So invest time into making sure that your system that your development environment is easy to use, more than it's fully correct, it's fully compliant to what you have in production. And this also links to another thing, but we will talk about this later. So new developers joining the team, they should be able to start working as soon as possible when they join the company, and in a very, very easy way. Ideally, once they have their laptop, once they have their software installed, not more than 10 minutes, they should have a running Magento instance locally that they can use for development. And they need to be helped to achieve this by the development platform. So how do we, what about deployment? So we talked about development locally, but what do we do once we go past this step? Well, first of all, the only permanent environment that we have is production. Clearly, that's not something that you can delete and recreate like this, unless you want your CEO to come over with a knife. So we can't do this for production, but every other environment, we should be treated as ephemeral. It should be treated as something that can go away at any point in time, and therefore it needs to be recreated quickly at any point in time. This has an additional benefit. It allows the developers to have to adopt the workflow that they want to have. We noticed that one of the things we did at the very beginning was to say, okay, developers, if you want those ephemeral environments, just put a label to your PR and we will create it for you. And that went great for a bit. But then we realized that some teams started complaining about it. They don't want this. They want to have something a little bit more stable to work with, something more with a longer life cycle. So we needed to make sure that our platform supports that. And this allows also the development teams to be independent from each other, not only in the actual development of the features, but also in the organization of their work. So everything should be automated. Creation, deletion. Nobody should ask for help to do that. And this allows, again, them to define how they want to develop the code. So right now, if we look at our teams, we have one team that explicitly said, no, we want to have only one testing environment, only for us. Their workflow is a little bit weird if you look at it, because they merge sub branches code into other branches, but it works for them. So if the platform should allow that, should not be a problem. And again, when we look at this, at the possibilities that we have there, at how we want to deploy things, the only reasonable numbers are 0, 1, and infinity. This is something that I didn't invent. Sadly, I think it's a great principle when you deal with computers and automation in general. Everything that we do is built around those 3 numbers. Some parts of the systems have constraints, and the number of instances of a specific thing should always be 0. We can enforce that. Some other parts of the system have other constraints, and they can only support a single concurrent instance of something. And you have to be prepared for that. But where you don't have those constraints, you don't have to put artificial limits. Okay? Infinity should be your limit. Of course, we know that this is not practical. Because you will always have, a quota limit somewhere at your hosting provider. But the platform, the system should allow potentially this unlimited scalability. So we have our platform, we have our hosting, we have our Docker containers, we have everything. We have our shop. How do we make sure that this thing scales, that performs well, and that it can scale also well? We're coming from the Black Week, probably for us, for me personally, the most stressful week of the year. I'm not sure how I managed to be here today. But yeah, how do we make sure that all these things that we build are actually performing? First of all, don't think about performance once the job is done. Start early. Early in the development cycle, make sure that you build your system with scalability and performance in mind. There are numbers you can rely upon. Collect them early, measure. Try to break things, try to push those limits, go over those numbers and see what happens to the system. And when you talk about observability, it's also really important. It's crucial to align your expectations. Well, to first of all, to define your expectations. Don't go crazy there. It doesn't make sense. But also align your expectations to the ones of your users. We're not building this shop for ourselves. We're building this shop for people that want to buy lights. So what is it that they want? At the end, they are the revenue stream. They need to be pleased, not your internal teams looking at the metric and say, "Oh, this is fast." You might have a lot of microservices out there. They might talk to each other very, very quickly, but if this doesn't translate to a fast experience for your customers, it's all useless. So one of the things that that we decided to do there is to be mindful about where we collect the metrics. Latency. You don't want to measure the latency inside your system. You want to measure your latency as close as possible to the user, as close as possible to the edge. Your system responding very quickly for the first byte doesn't mean that the rest of the communication will still be fast. So try to put yourself in the shoes of your user. Try to see what they see and optimize there. Watch out, but when you talk about optimization, also watch out. We noticed that in the past. I mean, of course, when you start developing a shop, at some point you will realize, oh, this page is really slow. Let's try to do something about it. And one of the things that we noticed is that some teams tend to do blanket performance optimization. They look at the system and say, well, we see a problem there. Let's try to rewrite our entire front end to solve that. Most of the time, those solutions are causing more problems down the road than they fix. So we decided to use a different approach. We decided to collect metrics and reduce the scope of the places where we look at numbers in a way that we can optimize the most common path that the user goes through. So we don't generally optimize PHP for speed, but we look at the different page types that we have. We look at category pages. We look at PDPs. We look at homepage. We look at the inspirational page or CMS page, however you want to call them, however your marketing team calls them. By looking at specific values there and comparing them with what is the customer journey, you can really identify, okay, where can we optimize in a way that the optimization becomes a low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can do easily. It's something that has a very high impact. And by doing this, we realize that the smaller the changes you do, the greater the advantage that they give you is, because slowly over time, with a lot of small changes, you start building up a strategy around those improvements. You start identifying patterns there. And this helps you build a solid foundation for the future changes, whether they are server-side includes that you want to spread all over the place, or deciding at some point this might end up in saying, okay, let's rewrite the front end entirely. But it's going to be a more informed decision than just doing it at the very beginning because it's going to be faster. There are some things we can talk about later if you want on this, not publicly. Again, so iterative approach here pays out, but there's a thing that you have to consider. Don't only look at the short cycle without looking at the rest, without looking at the past. It's really important. One thing that we started doing at some point, we started keeping our metrics for longer and longer, because this allowed us to not just do quick comparison, like, okay, we deployed this, did we have a performance improvement or regression? But also, okay, how does the performance look like a month ago? It's hard to do this. It's hard to say, well, we are still on track, because at that point, you might be in a situation where you have small decrease in performance over time, but when you look at in the large time scale, they compound and they will slowly erode the user experience. Not going to talk about the typical study from Amazon that says that 100% increase in response time, blah blah blah. But yeah, that's what happens. So be prepared for that. And another very important thing that we learned is not to be overzealous with optimizations. Some bottlenecks are unavoidable. Some bottlenecks are reasonable to have. Okay, they might not cause any problem. So yeah, don't work on them. Keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on them. They might break at some point, but don't stress yourself too much. Don't set crazy goals for your product import speed. Okay? Doing that in 10 minutes, it's not going to happen. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to happen. Is it worth it? No, so don't do that. And sometimes you will be in the situation where you feel like you're doing a lot of optimization work, but you don't see any result. What to do then? It's super frustrating. At that point, don't exclude the possibility that you might be measuring the wrong thing. That happens. So take a step back, reevaluate periodically what you're measuring. Don't rely on a dashboard that somebody built a year ago to evaluate the current performance of your shop. Make sure that you're still working on the right things. Security and compliance. This is also a very hot topic on our side. If you go around and ask our developers about me specifically, they will complain for sure. And one thing that they will tell you is that, oh, this guy always looking at our code, always leaving comments, 30 comments in a single PR. They're right. They're absolutely right. I do that. I hate myself for doing that, but I still enjoy it sometimes. But the thing is, this is something that happens a lot at the very beginning, but there's a pattern there, and you will see that slowly over time, the amount of complaints decreased. Why? Because the platform matured, and together working with the developers, we started fixing the issues. We started changing the mindset. We started, ingraining the idea that that's the way you want to check things, because we're humans. We fuck up all the time, and it's time we accept that fact and let someone else help us with it. And this being annoying, in the long run, it always pays off. Always pays off. It saves you the bigger problems down the line. And again, security is a mindset, so you need to insist on it. You need to ingrain this in the development process. You can keep a good security posture. It's hard, but it's not impossible. But you can do it. You can make it easier with proper housekeeping. That's super important. Don't let the piles of garbage around clean up sometimes. And also in this case, automation is your friend. Updates for, Magento has lots of plugins available out there. And generally a single Magento installation uses quite a lot of them. Do you keep them all up to date? Well, it's complicated. It takes a lot of time. So automate that. Don't wait for a developer to have time to do that. Have a bot somewhere that does that for you. And the developers can at that point just review the code that the bot created, just like it's a colleague. And again, the development platform we provide has this already included. It allows us to provide a better included framework for those kind of things. And developers actually enjoy that, because once they start using it, they realize that they don't have to think about those things, and those things just happen. So they have someone already pushing them to do that. Be paranoid. Yeah, paranoia. It's the name is scary. Some people associate it with ugly feelings. I think it's actually a desirable trait in healthy doses. Don't overdo there. it's most of the time you don't see an immediate risk to the business. But an unexpected risk for a company is a greater challenge than unexpected risk. On this, we again we can talk about a GitLab issue, an issue with GitLab CI later that really explains the whole idea behind this. But in general, always aim to increase the knowledge of your system, whatever it is. Unknowns are always less risky than unknowns, no matter what. This also means if you need to take a trade-off, if you need to make a decision and take a trade-off that involves security, don't do this lightly. Do it if you have to do it, but be prepared. Okay. A former colleague of mine once said an amazing truth. Information travels at the speed of light, right? And shit happens. In our world, both things are true. And, they combine, and, shit happens at the speed of light. So always be prepared there. And security is one of those topics where the cloud can really help us. We have lots of managed services available at our cloud provider that can allow us to offload those security concerns. You can run your Kubernetes cluster, sure, but keeping it up to date, keeping it patched, do you really want to do that? It takes a lot of time. It's not easy. So this is one of the things that, when people say, yeah, but the cloud is expensive. Sure, it is. But how expensive is to have a team managing your platform? How expensive is to have a fuck up there and a security breach one day? So when comparing cost again is not so easy to do. And another thing, given that we're talking about the cloud, don't overlook what I call the non-core services in the cloud. When we think about the cloud, we think about Kubernetes, we think about the hosted databases and stuff like that. But there's a bunch of things around this that always help. Logs, for example, you want to have a good log platform from your cloud provider, and especially audit logs. So not what happens in the system, but what are people doing with the system? You want to have this information. It's a gold mine that you have there. Build some toolings around that. We know that, again, with Magento, you need some interactivity. People will touch it. Problem is that when people fuck up, they tend to not make it very public. So you want to make sure that you see when, not when someone specifically does something in the system, but when generally someone connects there, because that might be an indicator that can be connected with other indicators to say, okay, maybe there's a root cause of a problem there. So yeah, build some tooling around that, and they give you an additional peace of mind. Don't forget one thing though, logs are great, but they're a liability, especially with GDPR. Keep them compliant. You don't want to have auditors looking at your logs and saying, well, there's a fine coming out of this. You really don't want to do that. Again, go back to the beginning, be annoying. It's possible to accidentally log personal identifiable information in your logs. Make sure that your code reviews also cover those cases. We are approaching the end. I think I lost track of time, to be honest. I think we went a little bit too late. So let's wrap this up. Let's look at some numbers. We did a couple of, we're in this for a couple of years already. I know that this doesn't really measure developer productivity, but it's just a piece of trivia. We in the last 2 years, with all this system, we managed to open and close over 6,000 unique PRs to our system. So individual changes, individual improvements, features. And yeah, I mean, solid 20% of them are actually automated. Those security updates, all those things, we don't have to think about it. 20% of our work happens without us having to do anything. And all these changes turned out to materialize as almost 3,800 CI builds. So 800, almost 3,800 deployments with this. And for the fans of Dora metrics and stuff like that, we managed to go up to 30 deployments per day, which is an incredible amount, even for the best, the best development team working in cloud.
To production.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Deployments to production. Absolutely.
Wow.
Thank you. So, I talk already a lot. I'm not sure if you have questions at this point or if you're just tired or hungry, but yeah, questions, anyone?
You talked about platform engineering and the time or the goal to automate things, to make things repeatable, to make things consumable. Are you also investing into internal developer platforms and use tools like Backstage and or Crossplane?
In fact, yes.
Okay.
We're not starting from there. At the moment, we do have Backstage in our system, but it's mostly to provide the developers with a central place where they can collect a lot of information. One of the main issues when you work with the cloud, when you work with development in general, is that the amount of tooling that you have grows like crazy, and so do your bookmarks. We don't want people to start asking each other, okay, where do I find this? Where do I find that? Where do I find that? So we have a Backstage instance at the moment, and slowly over time, we're consolidating a view on CI, a view on PRs, a view on documentation. We found that Backstage is actually great for documentation because it forces you to have the documentation with your code.
Okay.
So yes, we're doing that. We didn't start from that.
Yeah.
We started on the hard tools for delivering, but we're getting there.
That's really interesting because I have that question also with me. Is it worth investing into that? Because that means that you would have another product development team developing that internal platform. And the question is, does it really pay off investing into that tool which helps other developers build their applications?
Good question. Good question. I'm also trying to find the answer there, to be honest. I think that most of the answer depends on the mindset of the team. And we noticed that especially with Magento developers, they have their own mindset. Magento forges you in a specific way, and that usually is not a very cloud native way of doing things. So also like introducing those kind of tools tends to be a hard job. But let's see. We see more adaptability to those tools from other teams than from our shop team. But only time will tell. Again, small changes over time. Doesn't make sense to spend a month of 2 developers working on Backstage than for people to just not use it. On the other hand, providing them with something empty, it's also useless because you will never get the traction from people to use it. Strike a good balance. So I can show you what we have later. We can talk about that, but yeah, slowly over time, I think it's better to first consolidate the information and then build upon that.
Maybe one additional question. What I think makes a real difference in comparison to what Adobe Commerce Cloud provides is the ability to really tie infrastructure to your development workflow and also tie in observability. This is what I really like about this Kubernetes space, that it takes some time to get there, but you can tie development with observability and get out of that this famous gold signals, right? You did a deployment. What is my failure rate? What is my latency? Metrics like that are often forgotten in this, I would say, commodity hosting space where you just throw over your code and hope that everything will be fine. But can you prove it's fine? Can you see it? How fast can you see it? Can you roll back? Can you roll forward? And give some feedback to the developer saying the deployment went fine. Not only your code is there, but also checkout is still working. And our error rate doesn't go up even in hidden areas. Let's say customer account isn't working, you can't edit your address or whatever. Sometimes there is this hidden things which pop up to business or get reported 6 hours later after your deployment. Can you quickly see that? And I think that proves that your development organization and also infrastructure organization, your DevOps team and SRE team really improve. And that gives a great value in that. And I know the level of where you are playing. This is really, really important when you make thousands of orders per day. To see that quickly. And I think this is one of the benefits you are getting out of investing into your own infrastructure, because this is not something which you currently can't buy off the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, we see this a lot with New Relic. We use New Relic for application performance monitoring. Yeah, sure, they provide quite good signals, but most of the time people look at the aggregate. You know, increase in error rate since the last deployment. Sure, but where? Increase in latency since last deployment. That's something that, to be honest, nobody looks at anymore because it varies so much that it's unusable. So one of the things we have invested time in in the weeks before the Black Friday was exactly a like proper observability for response times for specific page types. You know, a small change in PDPs will be much more visible than a large change somewhere else, simply because you serve way more PDPs than the customer support page. So if you isolate those numbers, you can then observe the changes there much better than with tools that give you an aggregated the golden signal, like you said before, like Redic, for example. But again, you need to still force the developers to look at those signals, because the approach is always like, let's deploy and we get alerted if something is wrong. Doesn't always work. Be a little bit more proactive.